Hi. So I'm in a little copse, very small section of forest near where I live of pine trees. I've always liked the pine tree because it represents longevity and it represents the more solar aspect, I feel, of our consciousness, the evergreen nature, the more immortal nature of our potential. A lot of people say, you know, we are souls, yes, we're eternal. But yes, there is an aspect of our being which is eternal. Divine nature, the Buddhata, that's spoken about in some texts, the divine essence, the seed of Christ, the seed of God that sits within us. And that ultimately tends to be quite asleep in amongst all the calcifications of our psychology, the calcifications of matter, our karmas, our skandhas, whatever you want to call them. The web of weird has encased this consciousness in order to create experience for that consciousness to hopefully wake up within and develop and grow into a self-realized divine being, you know, participating in whatever level of creation that we may or may not have the opportunity to do. And so there's no guarantees really that ultimately we exit this wheel of creation consciously or unconsciously. And what tends to happen is if that Buddhata, if that divine seed sinks deeper and deeper into egotistical, natural, mechanistic states of thought, feeling and action, then it becomes tougher to realize oneself within that. In which case, certain traditions talk of certain realms of the underworld, infraconscious realms, hell realms, where Mother Nature, the Divine Mother, purifies that essence again, but purifies it through mechanistic processes of confinement, processes of tribulation. And you can almost see at the moment, it's almost like humanity's had a shift, right? There seems to be this step change down into an extra set of laws that are governing us at the moment. Some of them are visible, some of them aren't so visible. And that to me has said that humanity is actually going through a degradation process. I mean, most potentially my colleagues or friends would disagree with me on that. You know, everyone talks about ascending to the fifth dimension and ascending to certain aspects of divine consciousness. But that doesn't happen on its own, it doesn't happen automatically, so no one's going to wave a magic wand. You know, Pinocchio's fairy godmother didn't give Pinocchio, or didn't make Pinocchio into a true little boy, you know, until he'd gone through trials and tests. And so there's no guarantee for the more protoplasmic, subtle energy layers of our soul at the moment, as we either ascend or descend into states of or levels of mechanistic laws which constrict, apply pressure, and hopefully start to crack the ego shells that we've been holding on to so tightly, thus freeing and liberating the consciousness, liberating the genie from the lamp. So, you know, many traditions or many religions that have been hijacked and dogmatized speak of this perfection, this goal of perfection that we should all be striving for. And you know, it's quite easy to get trapped into that kind of self-pedestalized view of yourself, which kind of sees yourself as being holier than thou and righteous and all this kind of stuff, and perfect and good. But that's just, you know, being perfect is just one end of a polarity, right? And you know, Jung spoke a lot about, you know, the need to become whole. You know, is the real work, is the path to full consciousness and self-realization, not perfection, but to become whole, wholeness, holiness. And to become whole, we must understand, you know, that we have aspects within our psychological framework, within our inner world tree, that we don't know about. You know, they're buried quite deep. You know, there's a little rabbit hole down there, or a bit small for a badger. Don't know if you can see that. Just there. See? That's going down into the roots of the tree. And how often do we go down and dig deep and try to understand these areas of our fragmentation, all these areas of our unconscious, which need some attention. You know, they need bringing to the light. They need to be seen. They need to be integrated. They need to be understood and comprehended. Laid to rest. Some traditions talk about elimination of certain egotistical shells that trap the consciousness and killing the ego. I don't know what the right terminology is ultimately, but when you shine a light on something, when you comprehend something, it doesn't have any more power over you, right? So if you're caught up in a certain need to be right, or if you're caught up in a consistent pattern of anger or lust or jealousy or envy, you know, these shells, these little demons, they do capture your attention, and the more attention you give them, the more you play their game, the more you play your light through them, okay, the more you feed them, and therefore the stronger they become, and the more difficult it is then to extract yourself from it. And as I witnessed this morning with my two teenage daughters, and you know what, being teenage is not an easy job really, and especially during frickin' lockdown. I mean, the kids have been cooped up in the house, they're stuck, they're not going to school, they're not seeing their friends. I had a bit of an episode this morning with my two daughters. You know, they were fighting over cotton pads for their makeup. It was like, oh, you stole my cotton pads. No, I didn't steal the cotton pads. And I was kind of listening to this kicking off upstairs, and I was like going, do I get involved? Do I step in? do I get sucked into the drama, or do I just let it play out? And I chose to let it play out, actually, because one of my daughters really got very upset and started screaming and shouting and kicking off. And sometimes you've just got to let that happen. You've just got to let it all come out, let it all get spewed out, and then we can kind of clean it up afterwards. But you know, that it was a clear example of how we can, as humanoids, as humans, we can often get really trapped in one of our centers. Okay, we've got three brains, if you want to call them that. Gurdjieff talked about three brains. You know, certain Taoist philosophies and traditions talk about three centers. And these three centers have their own kind of intelligence to them, have their own kind of wisdom and brain to them. And if we get trapped in one of them too much, then obviously we're off center, right? We're off balance. It steals energy from the other centers. So when the emotions arise, and they're strong and they're powerful because there's an attachment behind them, and there's this, and we lose the consciousness in that. We become more and more unaware of ourselves within the situation, and we haven't got the willpower, we haven't got the training to be able to maybe balance that emotion with a bit of logic, with a bit of mind, with a bit of intelligence, with a little bit of objectivity that can come from the head center. And then we take an instinctive or an instinctual reaction from our motor center. That can cause problems at times, and you just see it everywhere, and the patterns repeat, and away we go around a wheel again. So, you know, it's really important to I feel it's really important that if we're gonna progress, right? If we're not gonna sink further, right? Look at all these brambles here, right? Eventually they're gonna die. They're gonna rot. Yeah, there's mud, there's gloop, there's rotting leaves. You know, they're all sinking into Mother Earth. Mother Earth will break everything down through a mechanistic process, extract the energy and the essence from everything, and then recycle the rest. And it's a bit like that with our souls. You know, the Buddhata, the divine essence, will either get recycled again through nature and grow again through the different kingdoms of nature, hopefully to become human again and have the opportunity to self-realize and master itself and liberate itself to some extent, or it will just keep going around that natural wheel. Some traditions say you only get 108 chances within the human body, 108 lives before you get sent back down the down the chute. I'd like to think we get a bit longer, but I don't know. I don't know. No one really knows, do they? Maybe some people do know, but again, you only know when you've truly experienced. But in certain dreams that I have, in certain meditations I take, I know I have been down. We've been down to the depths, right? You know, when the infraconscious nightmares come about, when aspects of your psyche show themselves to you through dreams, through meditations, then you know that there's still work to do. You know there's still aspects of your unconscious that you're not aware of, that's trying to make itself, that's trying to show itself to you. So rather than shy away from it, rather than go, "Ooh, don't look at that. Ooh, God, no, that's scary. That's too scary." We have to face it. You know, we've got to get in front of it, and we've got to look at it, and we've got to understand it, and we've almost got to make it meditate with us. Yeah, we've almost got to, you know, if the demon comes and tries to rattle you, sit it down, pour it a cup of tea, pat it on the back, give it a hug. You know, let it sit down and hold space for it. Hold space for it. Let it calm itself. Let it integrate itself into you. Let it feel safe within you. Let it feel loved. You know, I mean, obviously, most animals that don't feel safe within or in or around humans, they will behave in a certain way which is very defensive and attacking. But if they feel safe, they behave completely differently, don't they? It's the same with us. Yeah. If we feel safe around people, if we feel trust around people, then we will let our defenses down, we will show our vulnerabilities, we will open up and heal and do what we need to do to get through whatever we need to get through. But it's difficult nowadays to find spaces where we can truly be ourselves and truly be honest with ourselves, and maybe ask for that kind of holding of space, which is why it is so important to go seek a healer if necessary, a good healer, to someone who's been through some stuff, someone who's, you know, used to holding space for people, who's willing to just allow people to be who they need to be in that moment, without judgment, without trying to fix. You know, just healing isn't about fixing at times. Sometimes it's about reaching a level of integration and acceptance of the experience of the soul stream, in order for it to be able to move on. You know, the bark of this tree is a bit gnarly and twisted. You know, it's integrated its traumas, it's integrated its scars, and it becomes part of the beauty of the tree as a whole. Yeah, so as a whole, we learn to understand ourselves fully, and we learn to integrate and act within the world with a more holistic approach. We transform some of the more destructive qualities within us into creative qualities. And so the girls did eventually settle down, and now they're painting stuff on the kitchen table, and I've chosen to come out and get some fresh air and a walk, which is great. So yeah, you know, in most what I would class as practical spiritual traditions, there is never really this push to strive for one polarity, perfection. Okay, there's this. It's more about understanding. So it's obviously karma is involved, right? So karma, the universal law, the web of weird, you know, it's the classic school ground for us to be able to understand what we're putting out into that web and how we're doing it. You know, the mirrors that the web presents us, the things that come to us, the way we respond to them. It's all a school ground. All right, it's a college, it's a university, wherever you're at, you know. But if we treat it that way, we can grow through it. If we just go into victimhood with it, right, then we tend to stagnate a little bit. And now there is a difference between being a victim. Yes, you know, we're all victims and perpetrators and rescuers at certain times in our lives. But there's a choice between being a victim of something which has been harmful to you and then going into victimhood over it. And there's a fine line there. So, you know, not victim bashing here, but ultimately there's a chance to heal from most things, and you know, sometimes it takes lifetimes to do it, but with willpower and with a bit of help, you know, it's always possible to have that integration process, to have that process of wholeness come back to the individual being that has gone through, you know, natural life experiences. Life doesn't owe us anything really, you know, we think it does, but it doesn't, and it can be a bit of a ghetto, a bit of a jungle. Alright, so we've all got to kind of accept that at some level. And yeah, I mean, the aspect of or rather the question of how do we do that always comes into play. How do we become whole? And it's a process. It does, you know, it doesn't just kind of happen. You know, it's a process, and sometimes it can take eons, ages and ages round the wheel before you become a fully fledged human soul, before you manage to marry the human soul with the divine soul, before there's that kind of sacred marriage that goes on between I don't know what you want to call it the monad, you know, the triunity of your personal being within God versus the triunity of your individuation within the human experience, and therefore you then begin to start to create what's called the causal body, the solar body, the body of light, the Merkabah, the wedding garment that the Bible talks about, which again is represented by the evergreen pines. You know, they never lose their needles, or sometimes they do, but they remain green, and that's what I like about spending time with the pine trees. It reminds us that we have an opportunity to build that body, to build that soul, to build that eternal aspect of us that doesn't have to undergo a degradation. Okay, it doesn't have to undergo a recycling, or doesn't have to undergo what the Bible calls a second death, because through conscious work, through initiation, that being has managed to work out enough of its calcifications in order to not have to come back into physical experience unless it actually chooses to, and generally it chooses to help others. You know, it takes some strong beings to want to come back after eons of trying to get out. And there's obviously that risk that, you know, a fall might happen again. So yeah, I wish you a peaceful remainder of your afternoon or day, or whenever you're seeing or watching or listening to this. You can probably hear some of the bird song in the background. It's a peaceful little forest, this, so I'm just going to have a little tromp round and then go home. Take care. See you next time.